Hey guys, welcome to Mad Scientist BBQ. I'm Erica Yoder, and today we're doing a review of this gorgeous pit behind me here. It is the TMG Volunteer. I've used it quite a bit, and I know how it works pretty well, and I'm going to give you guys all the pros and cons exactly how I see it. Let's get some things out of the way from the beginning. This pit was given to me by TMG to review, provide feedback, and then ultimately give away to one of my patrons over on Patreon. Every month I do a contest and I judge the contest, and if you win, you get sometimes a smoker, sometimes leather aprons, thermopens, gift cards, something to do with barbecue, and they're all good prizes, like a Yeti 250 quart cooler, this smoker for the month of September, and most of the smokers that come through here end up being given to a patron. And if you get on Patreon, make sure you check out Discord. It's kind of a private messaging app, and you get to chat with other people who love barbecue just as much as you do. I'm on there chatting. Depending on what tier you are, you can send me direct messages and ask me questions directly on there. But it's a great resource for anybody who loves barbecue. We're chatting barbecue all the time. So the contest on Patreon is where this thing's going, and I didn't pay anything for this pit, so make sure you get that clear right from the beginning. But rather than me trying to sell this thing, I wanted it to go to somebody who's supporting the channel, somebody on Patreon, somebody who really loves barbecue, who might not have an offset smoker like this. So that's where this thing is headed. So you can check out the rules for the contest if you're interested in winning this Volunteer, but stay tuned for the rest of the review so you know what you're getting yourself into. And then lastly, whether they sell 0 volunteers or 1 million volunteers, I make $0 from any of that. So I have no financial incentive to really pump this thing up and make it seem better than it is, or to make it seem worse. These are my honest opinions from having used this thing a lot over the last couple months. All right, let's talk about this pit itself and how it cooks. First of all, this is made in Knoxville, Tennessee. It is called the Volunteer because of Tennessee. They like to say that they are rescuing Texas barbecue the same way that the Tennessee Volunteers went down to defend the Alamo. I'm not sure how Texans would feel about that, but I think it's pretty funny. I've met the owners of TMG. I really like those guys. They're really, really cool, and they do incredibly good work. So in terms of fabrication, I'd put their stuff up there with anybody. I mean, it's just beautifully put together. The welds are gorgeous. The thing is going to last forever. And then they do some really cool stuff like these wheels and tires that I'll show you here in a second. But let's talk about some of the main things that you need to know about this pit. The pit is 27 inches in diameter, which means you got quite a bit of space, more so than obviously 24 inches in diameter, which is pretty popular. So you can think of something like the Fat Stack 120 or the Workhorse 1975 or the Mill Scale 94. Those are all 24-inch diameter tanks or pipes. In this case, we have a 27-inch diameter pipe, and I think that extra diameter really allows a great cooking environment to be present when you're trying to make awesome barbecue. Now, the stack is pretty big. I think it's maybe 5.5 inches internal diameter. Don't quote me on that. There's a damper for the stack. There's a door to the firebox. And as you may know, offset smokers are generally just 2 pipes that you weld together, put a stack on one end, build a fire on the other end, and you're cooking barbecue. But there are a lot of nuances that go into making some better than others. So let's start on the stack end. We'll move toward the firebox and we'll talk about all the features, and I'll give you my subjective impressions of how the thing cooks and whether or not I think it's a good choice for you to purchase. Before we can actually get to the stack, we have to talk about this right here, the handle. So this handle is how you actually move this thing around, and once you guys see the wheels and tires, you're going to understand that they took off-road seriously when they built this thing. So with this handle, you can pretty easily move this thing around, even though it probably weighs 1,000 pounds, and it's got this rare earth magnet that kind of holds it to the collector. Now, let's talk about the collector. It's kind of a Franklin style collector. It's nice and big. It's going to draw the air really well. And then we have the stack, which is nice and tall. It's not too big around so that it kind of fights against the wind. Basically, the way stacks work, generally speaking, is that the narrower the stack, the more it resists wind interference with the draw. And the bigger the stack is, the more susceptible it is to kind of being disrupted by the wind. So here, it's kind of a happy medium. It draws really well. You can use the damper anytime you want to reduce the airflow and kind of have slow, gentle airflow in the chamber as much as you want. That's something that's completely up to you based on your needs, whether you're trying to render fat or whether you're trying to lay on bark. All those decisions go into it, but you have that option available. Also, it's important to note that this stack can be folded. Here we have a nut that's welded into place, so you just unscrew this, you lay the stack down, there's another place to screw this in to lock it in place in the folded position. That was a really brilliant, simple move that they did, and it just makes it really great. Anytime I want to move this thing, I load it up on a trailer, put the stack down, lock it in place. I need to put the stack up, lift it up, and lock it in place right here. A brilliant way to do something very simply, and it's super effective. Next, we need to talk about these wheels and tires, because the guys at TMG are, I think, tire nuts. I don't know, I haven't spoken to them about this, but this seems excessive, but awesome. So I kind of view this as one of those things. I have a lot of things in my life that I kind of categorize this way as stupid, but awesome. Like I bought a big cabinet humidor. It was kind of stupid, but it's awesome. And I kind of view these wheels the same way. Totally unnecessary, but it looks like $1 million, and I just appreciate that they made it look awesome, and it makes it really easy to move these things around, especially on concrete. The way the handle turns, you can turn this thing into tight spaces, because how much you turn that handle isn't limited, so you can really get this thing in tight spaces. It rolls super easily on concrete, and it rolls well on grass as long as you don't have big divots, because if you hit a big hole or something, there's going to be a lot of torque that gets put on the handle there, because these tires are relatively far from that center axis, so just be aware of that. But in terms of how this thing moves compared to other smokers on casters or little wheels, big fan, love this design. It's something I never would have thought of, but now that I have it here, I really appreciate it. Next up, let's talk about the shelf. So here we have an expanded metal shelf. I'm not myself a big fan of shelves at all. This is extremely sturdy though. I mean, I could sit on this thing and it won't break off. I wouldn't recommend that, but I test things. So that's something I would do. You can also get it stainless steel if you want to use it as a prep surface. You can get, I think, a butcher block even as the front shelf. For me, I just prefer simplicity, and I'd actually prefer no shelf, but a lot of people really like to work on the shelf. And as I say that I don't like shelves and I wish it would be removed, I'm currently using it for this ThermoWorks Pro, but they have their use. It's just not my preference. But if you like it, this is very well built, very sturdy. Now we move up to tell-true thermometers. We have two tell-true thermometers that don't interfere with where the meat is placed. So for instance, on the Fat Stack Backyard Pits, that thermometer is right where you would have meat, which is a huge pain. I'm not a fan of that thermometer placement at all. Here we have a thermometer on either end, and they usually read almost dead even though in the middle it's a little bit hotter, but you have a good quality thermometer, and you have two of them so you can compare kind of how the air is moving, where the heat's traveling within the cook chamber. And then we have the handle to the cook chamber door itself. This is not a light door, but it's totally manageable. So if you compare this to, say, the Workhorse 1975, it's a lot lighter. This is, I believe, 1/4 inch thick steel all the way around. I think everything's made out of 1/4 inch thick steel, but it's possible to lift it without too much effort. In the, say, Workhorse 1975, which is another great pit, but that door is really heavy. It's something you need to know about. So if you're gonna have struggles lifting a really heavy door, that might not be the right answer for you. This one's not light, but it's not nearly that heavy. Also, you can see that they overbuild everything at TMG. So I don't think that this door is gonna warp from heat, but they have these welded in place to make sure that there's 0% chance that these doors warp. And one thing I should say about just the quality of their manufacturing, my 1,000-gallon smoker, I paid for somebody in California to put it on a trailer. I built the body of the smoker, but I had somebody build it on a trailer for me because I thought I need a professional to do that, because if something goes wrong, it goes really wrong when you're towing, a big smoker on a trailer. I have had nothing but problems with that trailer since. And as a matter of fact, I talked to the guys over at TMG. They're going to build me a new trailer. I'm paying for it, by the way, it's not for free. They're gonna build me a new trailer because I've seen the work that they've done, and it has been absolutely mind-blowing how good it is. Those trailers are overbuilt in the best way, and they're beautiful to see. My buddy Chris Stafford in California just ordered a pit from them. He had it delivered. If you look at the photos of this thing, it looks incredible, but to see it in person is even more impressive. It is gorgeous. Now, let's get back to the volunteer. So, once this door is open, you see that you have a lot of space in here. You could probably fit 6, 7 briskets. You could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 briskets probably. I mean, you might even be able to squeeze in 9. But the point is, you have a lot of potential space. Whether you want to use the top rack or not, generally speaking, I prefer not to use the top rack, but it's there available to you if you want it. It's not that it cooks hotter, it's just that it makes it a little more difficult to get in there and reach stuff, even though this is a pull-out rack. So this rack you can pull out and get to anything in there that you need to. And I think it's just a really good design. You know, it's very user friendly. And so if you know what you're doing, you can make a lot of great food without having to have a humongous smoker. Now the smoker is big, but it's not unwieldy in any way. And one thing you guys should know is that I've used this pit on multiple occasions to cook for catering events that I had. I've used it to cook ribs when I had a 500-gallon pit full of briskets. I've used it to cook brisket, of course. I've used it for beef ribs. I've used it for all kinds of things. And I've been really, really pleased with it. And when we get to the Firebox, we're going to talk about how to run this pit and some pitfalls you might encounter. No pun intended on that one, actually, amazingly enough. But we'll get there. Lots of space. There's no baffle. And we just kind of have a straight shot into the cook chamber, which is something I'm usually a big fan of. Moving further back, here we have the spot on top where you can lock in the stack when it's folded. And then on this shelf in the front, we have a paper towel holder right here. And then we have a couple spots where you can hang barbecue tools. We have another set of awesome wheels and tires. And then we have the Firebox. Let's take a look at that. All right, here we are at the Firebox, and this is really the heart of how a smoker works. I struggled with this pit actually for a while because I was trying to run it like a big offset would run, because it's a larger diameter cook chamber and the Firebox is nice and big. And so I thought I'll build a huge coal bed and then have some base logs and run it like I would a big offset. Well, the issue is this smoker doesn't like to run that way. Whereas the Franklin pit is kind of like a large offset in miniature in how it likes to run the fire and just kind of how the air moves. This is like a backyard offset, but larger. And what I mean by that is the way this thing likes to run is a relatively small coal bed, a log or two, just like that, right above the coals, burning an open flame, and then you add another log. It doesn't like multiple base logs and a huge coal bed that you then try to rein in. Then you get lots of radiant heat, and it doesn't really like to run that way. But if you run it like this, it works like a charm and cooks great, great food. Now, is this my favorite way to run a fire? No, not particularly. But is it really easy? Is it like a direct transfer from somebody who had a kind of a junky backyard offset and they want something really nice? The transition to this is going to be a piece of cake. They're going to be doing the same thing, but a little bit bigger. And instead of fighting against the smoker, it's just going to work. It's just going to do its thing, and it's going to cook great barbecue. So I'd suggest being aware of that before you decide if this is the right pit for you or if something else is. It wants to have small coal bed, a log, maybe two, not too big around, not too long, but you can fit some decent sized pieces in there. That's something that wouldn't go in most backyard smokers, but on here, it just works. It does everything it needs to. One other note, if you upgrade to these wheels and tires, they can get hot if you're burning a raging inferno in the Firebox. So if you're trying to build a big coal bed and run this thing like a big offset would run, then you're going to run into some issues with those tires getting hot, especially on the top side here. So if you're running regular barbecue temps, the tires will get warm, but they won't be super, super hot. If you're trying to go 600 degrees in the cook chamber, then the tires will get really hot. And actually, I'll test them with an infrared thermometer right now and see what temperature they are. I don't think it's anything to worry about as long as you're not trying to melt down your neighborhood with, you know, a nuclear hot fire. All right, let's see. So, if anybody wanted to know, 160 degrees. So, it's warm. I don't think it's anything to worry about. I could be wrong on that. I haven't experienced any issues with it so far. When I built a really big coal bed, I noticed the tires were getting pretty hot, but this is, at least in my opinion, not a huge deal. Let me show you guys how I usually like to run this thing, what's given me the best results. So I take the Firebox door, I don't close it down too much, but most of the way closed. Something like that, because it reflects that heat back in there and keeps the fire hot, and you aren't losing smoke and heat out of the backside of the smoker. Now let's go over to the stack, and I'll show you how I like to use that. For the stack, I found what works best is to either leave it completely open and control airflow with the door to the Firebox, or if necessary, if I really need to slow the air down in there, I can take this down to about maybe halfway, and it still works well. The stack is tall enough that it still draws air, but kind of slows the whole process down. If your temps are getting a little too high, you might consider doing this, but I found that somewhere between here and wide open gives me exactly the kind of airflow and smoke that I want. Just think what I think. And the last thing you need to know is that these thermometers are a good guide and they're consistent, but they're not going to give you exactly the temperature at the grate in the middle. So these are reading 230, 235 on either end, but in the middle, it's reading somewhere around 275, 278. So it's a 40 or 50 degree difference is pretty normal, and these react more slowly. And the reason why they're not reading quite the same temperature is because these are kind of in dead spots. Here it's in a dead spot because all the hot gases are coming out right here, and this dead spot is going to read a little bit lower of a temperature. Here, the hot gases get pulled down just in front of it, and this one I think is also in kind of a little bit of a dead spot. But they are consistent, they don't react super quickly, but as long as you know that going in, you can run these at temperatures that are going to give you what you want with your barbecue. So if these are reading 225, great. I assume that it's reading 250 to 275. If it's reading 200, I'm assuming that it's going to be around 250 degrees, maybe as low as 225. If it's in the 180s, I know I'm probably really close to 200. But if you know that going in, you can just subtract from the target temperature that you hear. Say somebody says 275, and then you say, oh, well, I'm going to run this thing at maybe 230, and you're going to get exactly the results that you want. And they're consistent end to end. And what you get inside is a whole lot of barbecue weather to cook a ton of great barbecue. And if you guys are curious about the precise placement of where I put that digital thermometer, I'll show you right here. It's pretty much in the middle, maybe slightly to the Firebox side of the middle, but it's pretty consistent from here all the way to the end. So just for your information and to make good choices the first time you fire one of these things up. So let's break down the pros and cons of this pit. Let's start off with the cons. It's big, so it's going to take up a fair amount of space. It's not going to be easily tucked away in some corner of your garage and you're not going to notice it. That's not this pit. Also, it's pretty heavy. To move it around, even though it's got these big wheels, probably going to require a little bit of effort. On flat ground, not so much, but if you're moving around the yard, definitely going to want somebody pretty strong to kind of muscle the thing where it needs to go. And then really, I think the last con that I have is that those thermometers are going to read a little bit differently than what's happening on the majority of the grate. But like I said, if you know that going in, you can compensate for that and get really consistent results. Now let's talk about some of the pros. Also, it's big, right? So it's a con and a pro. If you want something to cook a lot of barbecue, you want to invite all your friends and family over for, you know, like a huge barbecue, you can feed them all with this thing. Like I said, I've used this for catering events, some of them for very important people that I wanted to make sure all the food is good. If I trust this to cook that food, I really trust it, and it's made really excellent food. Another pro is that the wait time, here's a big one, the wait time is relatively short. So instead of signing up and you're gonna have your pit built in a year and a half or 2 years, they do them in batches. So they'll fill a batch, and I think it's every 16 weeks they do a run of volunteers. They just crank them out. I don't know for sure. I'll put their contact info. You can call them, talk to them, and they'll set you straight on all of that. So in as little as, I think, 16 weeks, they can crank you out a pit. And the people I know who've cooked on it have also really liked it, so I'm not alone in this. And another big pro is that in terms of fabrication and quality, I would put this up against any other pit builder. Even though I'm really great friends with a lot of pit builders, I think this is as good as the fabrication gets on any pit that I've seen. There are others that are in the same category, but this is top-notch quality fabrication. I'm by no means an expert, I just know what I see, and this thing is extremely well built. So much so that I'm trusting them to take thousands of my dollars to build me a new trailer. And they have a little utility trailer that I've been using, and that thing is awesome. Like awesome. I'm gonna buy that. I don't know if I've told them that yet, but I'm buying that. But yeah, just top-notch stuff from them. Another pro is that this thing looks so freaking cool, especially with those wheels. Like, I get wood delivered here pretty frequently, as you may be able to guess. And the wood guy shows up and he's like, what about this one? This one's really cool. And currently, I have probably a dozen smokers and grills back here. I see a Franklin pit, I see a Tagwood Argentine grill, I see a Goldie smoker, I see some other smokers in the corner. I've had my 500 here, but the one that was the most impressive to somebody who just walked up and was looking at the smokers was this one. I think it's the awesome wheels and tires. I'm not suggesting you should pay for that upgrade, but if you do, it's gonna draw some attention in a very good way. Then another con is the philosophy behind how they like to move the air and how they like to run the fire in this pit is a little different than the way I would prefer. I prefer to build a really big coal bed and have some base logs and then kind of restrict airflow to adjust everything. With this, it doesn't want to run that way. It wants to run with a smaller coal bed and a log or two and just gently putter along, and it's extremely efficient but it's just not my preferred way to run the fire. So I have to say that. Can you turn out top quality barbecue with this thing? 100%. But it's just not my preferred way. It may be your preferred way. I know that for Lone Mountain Barbecue out in California, this is actually his favorite pit, even though he's owned a 500. He currently owns a 1,000-gallon pit. I think he has a reverse flow. This is his favorite. Lastly, we have to talk about price. Now, the base model for the Volunteer is $4,500. That means it's coming on casters. And if you have concrete and you're gonna put it in one place and it's never gonna move, then casters might be the way to go. The off-road package, I don't think it has these precise wheels and tires, but the off-road package is, according to my phone, $5,800. So it's gonna cost you more, but you'll be able to move it over something that's not concrete. Because trust me, if you got this thing with casters into your yard, you're gonna need like a forklift or like a football team to get that thing out of there. So with these, I can move it by myself in my uneven backyard, to put that in perspective for you. So those two options are very good, but the option that I would choose, not 99% of the time, but 100% of the time, is to put this thing on a little trailer. Talk about convenient. It'd be easy to move the thing around, on concrete, any place. You can move it on grass and wherever you need to, but you can also hook it up to your truck and take it wherever you want to go. Say you want to go to the lake for the weekend, you hook it up to your truck, you drive it there, you cook awesome barbecue, everybody loves it, you bring it back home, you park it wherever you want to, and it just does its thing. And the way these guys build trailers, I guarantee you that it's going to be a sturdy, extremely robust trailer. That's what I would do. But the downside is the cost for the trailer package is $7,000. It's a lot of money, but you're getting a lot of pit and a really cool trailer. So I don't know if this is the right decision for you. I've given you my opinion on exactly how it works and the options that are available to you and just my experience with it. I think of all the pits that were just kind of passing through my backyard, I've cooked on this one more than any of the others. And it really, really works and cooks really good food. Apart from the choice of airflow and kind of fire management style, I love everything about this pit. It just does its job. I think this would be a Bill Belichick pit. It's like, do your job. And this pit's like, yes, sir. And it just works. So I'm a big fan of this pit, big fan of the craftsmanship. So I think the big question for you is, does it make sense for you? So does it fit in your budget? Does it suit your needs, et cetera, et cetera? But if you want to win one of these, this one right here behind me is going to be given to a patron. You can go sign up for that if you are interested in your own Volunteer. But those are my thoughts. That's honest thoughts. I'm going to do a head-to-head with this, the Goldie's pit, and the Franklin pit. We're going to cook on all three of them side by side by side, and you guys can check out those results in a future video. But I've cooked on this thing a whole lot. I don't think my opinion of the Volunteer is going to change, but it will be a good baseline to judge the other two pits. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. I put a lot of time into testing these things out, try to run them hot, try to run them cool, try to fill them up with a lot of food, try to put one piece of food on there, and I hope it's been helpful to you because I've spent hundreds of hours running this smoker at this point, and I've distilled down for you what I think are the most salient details. If you enjoyed it, hit the like button down below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. You can also follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter you can follow me on X at Mad Scientist BBQ. And lastly, you can follow me on Patreon, and if you do, you can enter the contest to win this thing. I'll see you guys next time.